Hey guys, Lawrence here with the DIY haircut, and some time ago I asked Trek, can I get a bike that is more affordable, something everyone can afford? And so they sent me this one, the Fuel EX 9.9. Yeah, this one comes with SRAM XO, but you can also get XTR. But if you want to go wireless with Axis, it's only €1,000 more. So this is of course not a budget-friendly bike. Now I have a size large frame right here and I'm 1.84 m. The fit was pretty much spot on. However, it's a rather short trail bike, just good for having fun, messing around on the trails. It's not a full-on enduro racing bike, and that's perfectly fine. Just thought I'd mention it. The fit, yeah, perfectly fine for me and my length on this size large. Now, this frame, being a high-end Trek bike, has the Mino link, so that means you can have a low setting and a high setting for the bottom bracket. Going high steepens things, going low slackens things. I went with low throughout testing. I've not tried this bike in high mode. Maybe I should have, but honestly I found low still pretty high, and I would maybe like a lower mode like what you get on the Evil bicycles. Now in the back, the bike has 130mm of travel with 140 in the front. The reach on a size large frame is 470mm. The chainstays are 437. That's in the low mode. That pairs you up with a 66-degree head angle and a 75-degree seat angle. Honestly, could have been a little bit steeper, the seat angle wise, as I'll talk about later, but these numbers are pretty okay for a trail bike. Something I really liked about this frame is the down tube storage. It's something Specialized first did, Trek followed, and I wish every other bike manufacturer would follow. It's so handy to just stuff some gels, some candy, some multi-tools, an inner tube, a mini pump, some CO2 cartridges, all in your down tube. You don't have to wear a backpack or strap them to the bike. It's super clean, it works, it doesn't rattle because there's a little bag to put stuff in. Absolutely love it. Every bike company should copy this ASAP because it's just better than any other solution out there. And because everything is in the down tube, you can still fit a whatever size water bottle inside the main triangle. Again, really awesome if you go on longer rides and you don't want to carry a backpack. Other things I really liked about the frame are the fact that the seat and chainstays are actually fairly narrow and they only widen near the end. This is great for heel clearance, and throughout the time of testing that I had with this bike, I can't remember how long it was because everything's in lockdown and time is irrelevant, but my heels never hit the chainstays or the seat stays, and that's something that doesn't really happen with a lot of bikes. So again, thank you Trek, really good job there. Now the suspension platform on this bike is technically a single pivot because the rear pivot is coaxial with the rear wheel, and then you have the front pivot point as well, but it also has some horse link characteristics. Again, I'll talk about those later when I'm talking about how the bike rides. First though, we need to talk about specs, and this bike, being the second highest end model available, has carbon everything. So carbon cranks obviously, carbon frame obviously, but also carbon rims, carbon handlebars, and even carbon seat rails. So it's actually pretty light at 13 kilograms. Now you might be thinking, well, how on earth did they get to 13 kilograms when everything's carbon? The answer is in the tires. Those are 29ers by 2.6 inch wide Bontrager XR4s. Really good tires for the sort of drier conditions that we're having right now. They roll pretty well. And overall it's just a fun, predictable tire. Didn't get any punctures with them. And these tires are mounted to 30mm wide carbon Bontrager wheels, the same that I had on the Top Fuel, and I like them on the Top Fuel, I like them on this bike. They're comfortable enough but also really stiff, and more importantly really lightweight, so you can really play with this bike and throw it around because there's not as much rotational weight as with my other bikes. The thing that to me really stands out with the wheels is the 54-tooth rear hub. It just sounds really good. Quick engagement, but not so quick that you feel everything coming through the pedals. I think this sort of 54 points of engagement is actually where, yeah, it's a good medium between the super high point of engagement hubs and then the ones that I have on the Spectral where nothing happens when you push on the pedals. Now, something I liked a little bit less are the handlebars. These are the Bontrager Line Pro, so again carbon handlebars, a little bit of rise on there, but they come at 780mm. Now you can always trim them down obviously, but some people, especially on the large and extra large sizes, may want to go wider and you can't do that. So I would prefer they just came at 810 for example, and then your local bike shop can trim them down for you as you like. That would be a better solution than having to use bar extenders. Now something I didn't really get along with are the grips. My hands are the size of my face, And these are really thin grips. They are the Bontrager XR Trail Elite. They're actually fairly comfortable and they have this sort of weird waffle style, but not all the way around. Really comfortable grips, just not when your hands are large. So maybe on a size large, XL frame maybe, but thicker grips, that would be awesome. Then further in the cockpit area are the combination of the shifter and the brakes. So full SRAM XO group set, but combined with Shimano Saint 4-pod brakes. What this means is no matchmaker or no I-spec. So you have 2 clamps on your bars, and maybe that means it's not as easy to get the right just ergonomics on your cockpit. Probably I would personally prefer the Shimano XTR version of this bike. I think it's the same price, and you then get the I-spec and everything will be lined up and will look super neat. The shock in the back is a Fox factory float Evol reactive. So this is a Trek specific shock that changes things a little bit, but it's too complicated for me to explain in a video that I'm trying to keep as short as possible. So go to the Trek website and have a look there. I'll talk about how it rides later on. And then in the front we get a factory 36 with the Grip 2 damper. It's a good fork. It's been tried and tested for a really long time, which is why Fox just updated it. But it's still good on this bike, and I'm pretty sure the new 2021 model will get the new 2021 36 on there. A final spec I wanted to talk about is the dropper post. I really like how the length of it changes depending on frame size. So large and extra large get 170 millimeters of travel. Really good, but I have some left over and maybe a 210 would be possible for me at my length, 184 on this size large. Again, I understand not everyone has the same leg to body ratio, but maybe longer is better, especially on the XL. 210 would definitely be possible. So now for the testing. The testing methodology is a little bit different than usual. I would have loved to take this bike out to bike parks and try and break my neck there, but I couldn't. So I just did local rides that are more of an XC sort of ride, but with some fun bits added in. So some really steep descents, really steep climbs as well, some technical Rudy stuff, but no real no double black sort of downhill trails on this bike. And so I'm going to start out by talking about the climbing performance, because that's what people asked me about on the internet. And I have to say, even with the shock wide open, the bike climbs really well. You can put the shock in the middle mode, which is like a trail mode. It'll climb even better, but I just left it open all the time because I found there was enough compression on the descents. Again, more about that later. But climbing, pretty efficient, especially when you're seated. This is similar to the top fuel because this just feels like a bigger top fuel. But it's efficient when you're seated and when you're spinning a high cadence. When your cadence drops and you start mashing the pedals, or when you stand up for sprinting, you will notice quite a bit of pedal bobbing. But for seated climbing, seated flat rides, it's really good suspension. It is a very simple suspension platform, so it's not as good as the sort of dual triangle suspensions with 2 short links in between, but it's definitely good enough, and I climbed some really cool stuff with it. However, the seat angle is 75 degrees on paper. That obviously will depend on where exactly the seat is. The higher you put your seat, the slacker the seat angle will get. And so, especially when climbing really steep stuff, I found that I was sitting in the travel too much. The front wheel would lift a bit, would start floating around a little bit, and it got too tricky to climb really steep stuff. Now, no matter how good your bike is at climbing, the climbing is still gonna suck. So let's talk about the descending instead. Again, short descents because I live in Flanders, we don't have mountains. But just like 20, 30, 40 meters of descending, that's what I was able to do, just really short, steep trails. And it felt good on the recommended suspension settings. So all I did was overinflate both the front and the rear a little bit to sit higher up in the travel, and also to get better pedaling performance, even than what it offered already, because I didn't want to fiddle with the little lockout in the back. So I overinflated the front by 10 psi and the rear by 20 for my body weight. Felt decent at that, so all I did was I just made the rebound a touch faster and add a little bit of extra compression just to keep the bike higher up in the travel. How this would affect riding on longer, rougher descents, not a clue, wasn't able to try it. But I wrote some things down here. The suspension on this bike feels pretty linear, so what happens is you go through everything just at a very linear rate. Again, great for the sort of, I think, easy descending that I was able to test, but I think if you're going to start doing massive hucks, it might blow through the suspension completely, and I would prefer a more progressive suspension platform on this bike. The mid-stroke is decent, but it doesn't ramp up at all. So whether you're at 50, 70% sag or at 100, you're just gonna blow straight through, and that's kind of a shame. Bike is a little bit poppy though, so when you do come out of them, you do pop at a more predictable sort of rate. That means sometimes you just lift off after a compression, but that's just my rebound settings. Now, because the head angle is 66 degrees, the bike is, I guess, nimble. I wouldn't call it unstable or twitchy, but it is pretty nimble. That's really fun, especially on a trail bike if you're doing tighter stuff. And again, this is not an enduro race bike. Trek has other bikes for that. So I can agree with the head angle, and I think it's really just a fun bike to ride, fun to play with. I even started doing some trials on this bike just because it was really fun to just mess around with. Also because I was locked up indoors all day. Now, looking at my notes over there, I do mention that it's not really stable at super high speed. So I did a few of those, just point it down and see how fast you can go sort of runs off-road. And once you go over like 60, 65 kilometers an hour, the front does start to wobble a little bit. So slacker would be good, but again, it's a trail bike, not an enduro race bike. And so that brings me to the overall performance with this bike. As you can see from sitting over there, I'm a little bit chubby at the moment. And still I got a few KOM, so that's always nice for motivation and for bike testing as well, because it was on trails that I've literally done hundreds of times. So there were a few downhill pointing KOMs that I got, but also one that had a climb in it, which again means that if you overinflate the rear shock, you're gonna get pretty good climbing out of it. I was pretty much dead at the top of the hill though. But the bike runs really quiet, fun to ride, and it's fast. I was able to keep up with XC guys on some stuff, so good overall performance coming from this bike. The value though is a different point. This bike is pretty expensive. The price is listed between 7.5 and 8,000 euros, and you can choose if you want XO or XTR. Personally, I'd go with XTR again because of the cockpit issues, and because Shimano overall is just better than SRAM when it comes to shifting. That said though, if you want to gain, what is it that I wrote down, 100 grams on the bike and maybe lose some body weight, that's probably easier, you can save about 2,000 euros by going with the 9.8, which will still get all the carbon goodies. Conclusion time then, and the first thing that comes to mind when I'm thinking about this bike is versatility. It rides somewhat like a heavy tire XC bike. It just goes on flat terrain, it goes up the hill a little bit, and you can point it down, have some fun just jibbing or just going really fast down a hill. The bike will do pretty much everything. I love the storage in the frame. Every bike should have it, except maybe downhill bikes, I can make an exception for that. But every bike should have in-frame storage. It's so much better than any other solution out there. And it's overall just really fun to ride, and it makes you want to have fun on the bike and do some stoppies and some wheelies and manuals here and there and have more fun on the ride other than just trying to go as fast as possible. This bike is not a race bike. Maybe you can get away with it on some less gnarly enduro stuff, but it's a trail bike, it's a fun bike, not a race bike. I think that's pretty much the conclusion. Guys and girls, all 2.8% I think it was last time I checked. Thank you very much for watching. Hit the thumbs up, hit the thumbs down if you thought this video was garbage. Subscribe, please do. I also have a Bike Slice profile now, so I'll link that below so we can be friends on Bike Slice. And again, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one, or you'll see me in the next one because this only works one way.